Welcome to the Deep Dive. We take a stack of sources and pull out the key insights for you. Today we're tackling something you've definitely heard bandied about, this idea of Scandinavian socialism.
Ah, yes, the Nordic model.
Exactly. Figures like Bernie Sanders, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, they often point to Denmark, Sweden, Norway, Finland as these sort of ideal examples of a fairer society.
It's a very compelling image, that's for sure. This picture of, well, almost socialist success stories. But the sources we've looked at for this deep dive, they really suggest it's quite a bit more complicated than that label suggests.
That's precisely what we want to unpack today. Our goal here is to sort of cut through that popular perception. We want to look at the actual economic engines driving their high living standards. So if you've ever wondered, what really makes these Nordic countries work, or if we could just, copy paste it elsewhere, this deep dive is for you. We're aiming for some real clarity. Okay, so let's jump right in. This Scandinavian socialism idea. The sources we reviewed hit this pretty hard right away.
Yeah.
They argue that what people call socialism in these places isn't, well, socialism in the traditional sense at all.
That's really the crux of it. In practice, these countries are running on fundamentally capitalist principles,
Right.
strong market economies. But, and this is the key part, they're interwoven with these really extensive welfare systems.
Right. It's not just semantics, is it?
Yeah.
We found this quote from the former Danish Prime Minister Anders Fogh Rasmussen. He was crystal clear.
Oh yeah, that one's direct.
He said, and I'm quoting here, "Denmark is far from a socialist planned economy. Denmark is a market economy."
Doesn't get much clearer than that. It really pushes back against that common narrative.
So the idea isn't the state owning the means of production, like in classic socialist theory.
Not at all.
Instead, these really impressive social safety nets, healthcare, education, all of that, they're actually funded by the wealth generated through capitalism.
Exactly. The market economy creates the pie, so to speak, and then they use policy to distribute slices more widely.
Which completely flicks the usual assumption, right? People often think the welfare state replaces the market engine.
But the sources argue it actually depends on it. A successful, dynamic market economy is the prerequisite for funding those generous programs, not state ownership of industry.
Okay, so if it's not state-owned factories paying the bills, how do they afford these massive social programs? Universal health care, free university program. That costs a fortune.
Well, there's no magic trick. Our sources point to one very clear mechanism: taxes. Very high taxes.
Right, not just on corporations or the super rich.
No, that's a common misconception. The sources emphasize it's broad-based. Take Denmark again, a classic example. Their welfare system is funded by heavy taxation on pretty much everyone. And significantly, that includes the middle class.
How high are we talking?
Well, the effective marginal tax rate can go over 56%. Think about that. That's a huge chunk.
Wow, over half. So it's a serious financial commitment from the average citizen.
Absolutely. It's the price tag for those public services. But again, it's funding access to services within a market economy. It's not about the state owning the hospitals or schools outright. It's about citizens collectively paying through taxes to ensure everyone can use them.
That really drives home the difference from, say, old-school Marxist ideas of state control over everything. This is taxation within capitalism.
Precisely. And that distinction matters, especially when we look at their history.
Yeah, that's another interesting layer our sources brought up. It wasn't like they just landed on this perfect system from day one.
Not at all. There was a lot of trial and error. You mentioned Denmark. Well, back after World War II, they did lean more heavily into policies you might describe as socialist.
And how did that work out?
According to the sources, not great, economically speaking. By the 1980s, they faced some serious downturns.
Which led to changes.
Big changes. Subsequent governments shifted direction. They pushed towards more privatization, deregulation, basically strengthening the market side of the equation. But they did it while trying carefully to preserve the welfare state. It was a recalibration.
So they learned some hard lessons about that balance.
Definitely. And Sweden's story is quite similar. They built up extremely expansive welfare programs in the 1970s.
Which sounds good on the surface.
Sure, but by the early 1990s, they hit a major economic crisis. A big factor. High taxes were apparently driving businesses out of the country.
Ouch. So again, evidence that getting that balance wrong between the market and the social programs can really backfire.
It underscores how delicate it is. You need the market to generate wealth, but you also need policies that share it without crippling the engine itself.
It seems like a continuous adjustment process then, not a fixed ideology.
Exactly. And the sources note that both Sweden and Finland, even in more recent years, have continued to embrace reforms that strengthen market mechanisms. It's a dynamic thing.
Okay, so we've got the market economy funding the welfare state through high taxes and a history of adjusting that balance. But our sources pointed to something else, something less tangible maybe.
Yes. Culture. This came up again and again.
It seems crucial, doesn't it? Beyond just the economic policies.
Hugely important. The sources consistently highlight things like high levels of social trust, a strong sense of community, social cohesion.
How does that connect?
Well, the argument is that this cultural foundation, this trust and shared sense of responsibility is what allows the whole mixed system to actually function effectively. It's the oil in the machine, maybe?
Interesting. It's not just rules on paper, it's how people interact.
Exactly. And part of that social fabric, according to the sources, is a really unique labor environment.
Right, the unions.
Very powerful, but also highly cooperative unions. They apparently work closely with employers' associations to negotiate things like wages and working conditions through collective bargaining.
And the union membership rates are staggering compared to the U.S.
Oh, completely different scale. We're talking 50, 70, sometimes over 90% union density in Scandinavia. Compare that to, what, around 10% in the U.S.?
It's a massive difference.
And this strong collaborative labor system means a lot of issues are resolved between unions and employers directly, often without needing the government to step in with heavy regulations for every little thing. It contributes to that smooth functioning.
But this strong cohesion, this uniformity, the sources suggested there's a trade-off involved.
Yes, that's a really critical point they raised. This high level of social cohesion and predictability might come at a cost.
Which is?
Potentially a sacrifice of diversity and maybe dynamism for that security and predictability.
Explain that a bit more.
Well, the argument goes that by prioritizing collective well-being and a certain amount of social uniformity, these societies might place less value on radical individualism, or maybe the kind of disruptive innovation and risk-taking that's often seen as a hallmark of, say, American capitalism.
So it's a choice. Predictability and security over maybe higher highs and lower lows, or more disruptive change.
Sort of. It's presented as a different set of societal priorities. They choose a more predictable path, perhaps, over one that embraces more individualistic disruption, and that's a trade-off often missed when people just look at the welfare benefits.
Which brings us right to the big question. What does all this mean for the United States?
Yeah, this is where it gets really relevant for our listeners, I think.
The sources seem quite cautious here. They warn about the risks of American progressives seeing Scandinavia as this perfect model to just implement here.
Right, because simply admiring the outcomes without fully understanding the unique context, the history, the culture, the scale is potentially misleading.
You can't just lift and shift the whole socioeconomic model, can you?
It seems incredibly difficult, especially given the differences. The U.S. is just vastly different. Think about the sheer size, the cultural and political diversity.
And the general attitude towards government.
Exactly. There's a much deeper skepticism historically towards large-scale government intervention and high taxes in the U.S. compared to Scandinavia.
So what would it take, hypothetically, according to the sources, if the U.S. tried to replicate these Nordic-style policies?
Well, the sources paint a pretty stark picture of the required changes. You'd need a massive expansion of bureaucracy, for starters.
And taxes.
Oh, yeah. We're talking potentially tripling income taxes, not just for the wealthy, but right across the board, hitting middle-income earners hard.
Tripling. Wow.
Plus, likely implementing broad value-added taxes, VAT, on everyday goods. Things we currently don't tax at the federal level like that.
So much higher taxes for almost everyone, plus new kinds of taxes.
And significantly more regulation across the economy. The sources suggest this level of control could potentially stifle the innovation and entrepreneurial spirit that's, considered a core part of the American economic identity.
It sounds like a fundamental reshaping of the American system.
It absolutely would be. And the sources argue that these kinds of measures would likely face enormous resistance from many parts of U.S. society.
People just aren't used to that level of taxation or government involvement.
Or perhaps unwilling to accept it. It could clash pretty fundamentally with core American values around individual liberty, lower taxes, and that entrepreneurial drive, which are deeply ingrained.
So after digging through all this,
Yeah.
What's the main takeaway for you, for our listener?
I think the biggest thing is nuance. Calling the Scandinavian countries straightforwardly socialist really misses the mark. It
Yeah.
oversimplifies a complex
It's
reality.
more of a hybrid.
Exactly. It's a blend. You've got robust capitalism, market economies generating wealth, and then you have extensive welfare systems built on top of that, funded by very high broad-based taxes.
And critically, sustained by unique cultural factors, like high social trust and cohesion.
Right. It's not just the policies, it's the whole package: economics, history, culture, and understanding that distinction, that complex reality, is crucial.
Quite crucial.
Because if you don't get that complexity, trying to just copy the welfare parts without the underlying economic engine, the tax structure, or considering the vastly different cultural context of the U.S., well, it could lead to serious problems.
Not just fiscal strain, but potentially undermining things that are pretty central to American identity.
That seems to be the warning from the sources, yes. It's about understanding the whole system, not just cherry-picking the appealing parts.
So it really leaves us with a challenging thought, doesn't it? For the U.S. context, are we actually prepared, not just wishfully thinking, but truly prepared to look at our own very different, very diverse landscape and figure out pragmatic ways forward? Ways that fit our context without getting sidetracked by models that might look appealing but aren't necessarily built for us.
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it? Something to really mull over.